As the sun set, the thick woodland that surrounded our campground was covered in deep shadows. Sitting around the blazing fire with my pals, I felt the chill creep into the night air despite the fire's warmth. We were looking for a way out of the daily grind when we were miles away from civilization in the middle of the forest. I made the decision to go camping with my 3 friends, Jake, Lisa, and Mark, in order to re-establish our friendship and get back in touch with the outdoors. We had no idea that the peace of the woodland would soon be upended by a sinister mystery that would cause us to doubt the foundations of reality itself. The first night went by without any problems. The only noises in the area were the rustle of leaves and the distant hoots of an owl as the stars twinkled overhead. Our ghost stories, each more fantastical than the last, had the ideal setting. We chuckled, shakily brushing off the idea that anything otherworldly might happen to us. We had no idea that the forest harbored mysteries far darker than anything our minds could dream up. Weird uneasiness descended upon the camp as the second night approached. The flickering flames appeared to burn more slowly, creating long shadows that moved around the periphery of our field of vision. A sensation of dread pervaded the air, but none of us dared to express how uneasy we were becoming. When we first heard it, it was around midnight. The whisper was faint and far away, carried by a little breeze. The murmurs became more pronounced and louder as the night went on, but at first we thought it was just the wind playing tricks on us. It seemed as though there were voices in the forest all around us. We exchanged nervous looks, but nobody said anything. It felt as though the murmurs were coming from the trees themselves, all around us. A deep-seated primordial anxiety intensified my senses as I struggled to make out the words. "I warned you," the faint but indiscernible muttering said. "Leave this place before it's too late." I glanced at my buddies, my heart thumping in my chest. Their expressions reflected the same mixture of shock and incredulity that was racing through me. What in this far-off wilderness had we discovered? We made the decision to follow the source of the murmurs in order to solve the mystery. With our flashlights in hand, we braved the pitch-black forest, with the towering trees overhead acting as silent sentinels. The steady murmurs that led us along overshadowed the crunch of leaves beneath our boots. I started to feel uneasy as we ventured farther into the forest. The trees appeared to enclose us, their limbs entwined to create an oppressive canopy above. The formerly known terrain turned into an unfamiliar labyrinth that was unpleasant and confusing. The murmurs guided us to an open space, illuminated by the moon's glittering rays. A gnarled oak tree, with twisted branches that resembled skeleton fingers, stood in the middle. The murmurs intensified and came together to form an eerie chant that reverberated throughout the darkness. "Awaken the guardian, and the truth shall be revealed." We looked at each other uncertainly as the anticipation in the air intensified. Which defender? What veracity? The forest guarded its mysteries well, and we were only outsiders discovering something we couldn't really understand. A worn stone shrine stood in the middle of the clearing. Its emblem seemed to dance in the moonlight. The murmurs became louder, pleading with us to discover the mysteries that lie hidden deep within the forest. Trembling, we made our way over to the altar, our headlamps flashing in the shadows. The bravest person in our group, Mark, extended his hand to touch the old stones. His fingertips found contact, causing a shockwave that sent shivers down our spines. The woodland became quiet, and time appeared to stop for a while. Then a growl resounded from the darkness, loud and guttural. Turning, we saw blazing eyes staring at us from the shadows, making our headlights tremble. Something unlike anything we had ever seen materialized, a ghostly entity with phantom tentacles sprouting from its body. The sounds became agonized cries, and the beast moved closer to us, its unearthly presence causing a shiver down our immobile spines. The guardian had roused to our trespass, and we staggered back, unable to take our eyes off of it. And with the trees swaying and writhing as though they were sympathizing with the guardian's suffering, the forest appeared to come to life. There was an unexplainable crackling electricity in the air, and the earth trembling beneath our feet. When the guardian's eyes locked on each of us, in turn, silence spoke louder than words, and reality itself appeared to come apart. The guardian's eerie wails resounded as we made our way back through the winding maze of trees in a desperate attempt to get away. The murmurs continued, demanding that we run, but the forest seemed intent on holding us captive in its evil grasp. An overpowering intensity permeated the air as we staggered back into our tent, hanging over us like a stifling blanket. The lingering whispers were like a cruel joke, reminding us of the reality we had unintentionally let loose. The guardian's eerie cries echoed through the night as we snuggled closer, horror imprinted on our features. To familiar noises of the forest turned into a cacophony of fear as the hours passed in excruciating quiet. We couldn't sleep, our hearts racing with every sound of leaves rustling and twigs snapping. The guardian's presence lingered, a shadow haunting the fringes of our consciousness, so dawn brought little comfort. We argued over whether to go or face the guardian again, but it felt as though something unseen bound us to the forest, our destiny inextricably linked to the mysteries hidden beneath the old trees. The murmurs continued, a never-ending reminder that we were no longer in the woods by ourselves. Winds gave way to nights, and the guardian's power permeated every part of us. Strange patterns emerged carved into the bark of adjacent trees, and shadows swirled at the edges of our eyesight. The forest itself gave off the impression of being alive with a force that was beyond logic and malicious. Our previously close-knit group started to fall apart as dread and suspicion set in. The whispers of the guardian, now a constant in our thoughts, tormented us with tidbits of unfathomable truth. The whispering that never stopped, and the ghost of the guardian that was always there took the place of sleep in our minds. My friends fell victim to the forest's subtle effect, one by one. Once beaming with joy and companionship, their eyes now bore the guardian's eerie stare. The realization that I, too, was giving in to the gloom that clung to the forest's fundamental structure filled me with a rising sense of dread. I made my way back to the clearing where the guardian had awoken, a last-ditch attempt to find out. The murmurs led me, their words becoming a distorted chorus in my head. The tree, a gnarled oak, stood silently, its limbs reaching skyward as if pleading for freedom. Murmurs came together to form a single voice as I approached the stone altar. This voice spoke to the forest's old spirit. The guardian appeared in front of me, its gaze penetrating deep into my soul. A wave of energy swept through me, a link forming between me and the otherworldly being that, in its ethereal form, contained the truth. With a haunting melody in its voice, the guardian said, "Listen, seeker of truth. The forest is a place where worlds collide and where secrets exist that are older than time. You now have to testify to the long-hidden truth because you have aroused forces that cannot be contained." There were glimpses of a world beyond our own as the forest appeared to bend and change. I saw images of long-gone cultures, guardianships spanning the millennia, and old ceremonies flashing before my eyes. The murmurs became a story, narrating how our intervention upset the cosmic equilibrium. As the facts came to light, I realized how foolish we had been. The forest served as a bridge between other dimensions and as a custodian of the fragile balance that separated the two realms. This balance had been upset by our presence, and now the guardian was determined to make things right. I begged the guardian for forgiveness, for an opportunity to repair the harm we had inadvertently caused to reality. The guardian's old mourning reverberated with the murmurs, which were now a symphony of sadness. The sorrowful cries of the woodland appeared to reverberate through its entwined branches. I had a deep epiphany and offered myself as a channel for the energy required to bring the world back into equilibrium. With a solemn nod, the guardian, whose ethereal form pulsated with otherworldly light, acknowledged my sacrifice. The forest itself appeared to sigh with relief as the murmurs reached a crescendo and merged with the guardian's energies. The guardian and I united at that very moment, becoming a conduit for the cosmic energies coursing through the center of the forest. A phantom wail came from the trees, and everything around me turned into a whirling whirlwind of energy. Time stopped having any significance as I turned into a receptacle for the ancient force that wanted to close the hole we had made in the universe. The sun was shining brightly in the clearing when I woke up. The towering gnarled oak tree fluttered its limbs in the light wind. There was a heavy silence in the air once the whispers had subsided. Even though I was by myself and in the gorgeous forest, the cosmic energies that passed through me had left a lasting impression on me. Like dream echoes, the whispers, the guardian, and my pals lingered in my memory. Had it been a delusional experience, a spiral into insanity triggered by the seclusion of the forest? Or had I really turned into a channel for the ancient force that ran the interdimensional domains? When I came out of woodland, the outside world felt both strange and familiar. The truth that I had briefly seen was concealed in the corners of my consciousness, serving as a menacing reminder of the secrets that lay just beyond our comprehension. Even though the voices had stopped, their echoes continued, creating a ghostly chorus that would always reverberate in the recesses of my soul. And so among those who dared to journey into the heart of the bush, rumors about our disastrous camping excursion began to circulate. The ancient stones and twisted oak tree in the forest acted as a silent sentinel, protecting mysteries that existed beyond the confines of time. The guardian's cry reverberated through the eons, reminding us that some mysteries are best kept undisturbed, even when the cosmic equilibrium had been restored. As for me, I am a quiet witness to the powers that rule the worlds outside of our understanding, bearing the weight of the truth within me. Even if the whispers have stopped, their echoes remain, serving as a menacing reminder that there is never a clear boundary between the known and the unknown, and that the mysteries of the wilderness have the power to shatter reality itself. Therefore, the next time you're deep in the forest, pay great attention to the sounds of rustling leaves and distant owl hoots. Maybe there's a whisper, quiet and eerie, carried by the breeze, a warning to those who dare to go where the realms merge, a voice from beyond, a protector of secrets. My friends and I set up our tents close to the forest's edge, where the scent of damp earth and pine was heavy in the air. An abandoned quarry that loomed menacingly in the moonlight was what we were looking for. Adventure and the thrill of the unknown. We had no idea that our search for thrills would lead us into a terrifying experience that defied logic and permanently altered our spirits. Hidden in the shadows, the quarry, a remnant of industrial aspiration, was silent and forlorn. Our chosen location was made even more spooky by reports of odd happenings in the vicinity, including murmurs of ghostly figures and unexplainable phenomena. Disregarding the alerts, we established our campsite, our candlelight creating elongated, warped silhouettes on the sharp rocks. The weather grew chilly as night fell, and the sound of our laughter seemed to reverberate throughout the quarry. The warmth of the glowing bonfire temporarily dispelled the anxiety that persisted in the air as it danced before our eyes. We had no idea that the shadows around us concealed mysteries that went beyond the laws of nature. Silent, faint but unmistakable footfall from a distance signaled the approaching terror. Eager to maintain the image of a carefree night, we wrote it off as the midnight meanderings of local fauna. The footsteps continued, though, getting closer and louder by the second. The footsteps changed into an unsettling tempo, a repetitive tapping that appeared to emanate from the quarry's heart. An unease enveloped the camp like a shroud. With our faces covered in shifting shadows from the flickering firelight, we exchanged apprehensive glances. It was at that moment that we saw it. The dark shadow of a guy standing at the quarry's edge. The apparition stood there frozen in place, a chill running down our spines. We stepped forward against our better judgment, the dirt crunching underfoot. The figure withdrew into the shadows as we approached, leaving behind only the echoing remains of its footsteps. Once a representation of economic advancement, the quarry seemed more like a magical theater. We descended more into its depths, the walls of rock closing in around us, determined to solve the enigma. The tapping kept up its pattern, directing us as if by some invisible power. The tapping stopped as we approached the center of the quarry, giving way to a disconcerting quiet. The moonlight was having a hard time breaking through the pitch blackness as the air became heavy. At that moment, we came across a worn-out journal that contained the handwritten notes of someone who had gone through the same mysterious experiences that were now plaguing us. The diary described an abandoned mining operation that had uncovered something significantly darker than rocks. Because of their avarice, the laborers had dug too far, waking up a sinister entity that was hidden deep within the quarry. The records talked of whispers that echoed in the miners' brains, shadows that moved on their own, and a general feeling of dread that drove them insane. Our spines tingled at the last passage, which said that the quarry itself was a doorway to the world of shadows, a place where the distinction between the living and the dead was hazy. The thought that we had entered a world unconstrained by the laws of nature grabbed us. Driven to solve the puzzle, we continued forward, propelled by an invisible force that appeared to draw us further into the center of the quarry. The shadows danced in ghoulish patterns on the rough surfaces of the granite walls that appeared to shut in around us. We arrived at a vast aperture where an unearthly force filled the air. There was a loud, guttural growl that echoed throughout the quarry as the ground underneath us shook. Something loomed out of the shadows, a mass of blackness with luminous eyes that stared right into our souls. Fear paralyzing us, we stared as the shadows combined to form humanoid figures, each one a ghost of the past, doomed to roam the quarry forever. The murmurs came again, a choir of tortured voices expressing remorse and suffering. Console voices echoed, "You've awakened us," with a sadness that defied time and geography. "Like us, you are obligated to the quarry. All who upset the equilibrium are claimed by the shadows." An overwhelming feeling of dread overcame us as the information hovered over us like a curse. The figures moved forward in unison, resembling a melancholic dance. We were desperate and tried to flee, but the quarry had turned into a maze of shadows that held us in its unbreakable grasp. Not the darkness vanished as the spectral beings approached, and a bright light burst from the quarry's depths. An old and strong voice echoed through the cave, telling the darkness to move aside. The light grew stronger, so we shielded our eyes. When we ventured to look again, the quarry was motionless and silent. Those had disappeared, leaving the vast void empty of us. An uncomfortable quietness took the place of the stifling excitement that had been permeating the atmosphere. The journal was lying at our feet, its pages blank now, as though the darkness had eaten away at the writing. As the first rays of morning appeared on the horizon, we staggered out of the quarry. The early morning light made the previously menacing rocks appear innocent, but the night's recollections remained, like a haunting impression on our thoughts. We looked at one another gravely, the weight of the paranormal experience written on our faces as we broke camp. The quarry, which had once been a hub of industrial ambition, now served as a reminder of how thin the line was between the natural and supernatural worlds. The echoes of their agony lingered in the air, but the shadows that had claimed the quarry had been driven out. We departed that lonely spot, eternally altered by the shadowy night, a warning to anyone who ventured to walk where the living and the dead met. Even when it was gone, the quarry will always remain in our minds as a doorway to a world outside the known. There was a lot of excitement in the air as my friends and I prepared to go camping at the isolated silent lake. Tucked up in the middle of the woods, its crystal-clear waterways reflected the unspoiled splendor of the natural world. We were ready for a peaceful weekend spent in the company of nature and a break from the daily grind. We had no idea that the peaceful surroundings of Silent Lake would give way to a mysteriously terrifying night that would leave us plagued by unidentified sounds. Our escape from society was set in motion by the twisting trails, towering trees, and distant call of wildlife throughout the drive to the lake. As we arrived, the sun had already set, covering the campsite in lengthy shadows. As we set up our tents, there was a buzz of excitement in the air. The sound of the campfire offered a sense of warmth as night fell. The dazzling reflections of 1,000 stars seemed to come alive in the lake as night fell. The water took on a reflective sheen of liquid silver due to the moon's ethereal radiance. As we gathered around the campfire, telling stories and savoring the simplicity of the moment, our laughter reverberated through the silence. However, as the night grew longer, Silent Lake experienced an unsettling quiet. There was an uncomfortable quiet in place of the typical noises of nature, like rustling leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. The woodland seemed to be holding its breath, as though something greater than ourselves was waiting to happen. I brushed the discomfort aside, blaming it on the unfamiliarity of the nighttime wilderness. My attempts to make sense of the situation, though, were dashed when I saw a slight movement at the lake's edge. There was a slight change in the shadows, but it was definitely there. I was curious, so I walked up to the edge of the river and looked into the shadows. The shadows on the surface were warped into strange patterns by the moonlight. Struggling to make sense of the movement, I strained my eyes. Suddenly, the ripples took the form of a silhouette, a figure that was immersed in the depths. As I staggered back, my pals gathered around me, their expressions a mixture of fear and curiosity. My heart was thumping in my chest. The ripples in the water were all that remained after the figure in the lake appeared to vanish. We dismissed it as a figment of our mind and headed back to the comfort of the campfire, our uneasiness masked by layers of companionship and laughing. And the strangeness around Silent Lake grew more as the night went on. Little murmurs drifted across the atmosphere, resembling echoes from an era long gone. The words were unclear, like though they were being whispered by a wind from another planet that only the trees knew. The whispers became more insistent, weaving through the woods like ghostly tendrils, and a sense of unease descended upon us. I made an effort to persuade myself that it was only the wind and that the lake's serene surface was hiding nothing. We were left in a state of anxious suspense, while the murmurs continued, dancing on the border of our perception. We made the decision to investigate Silent Lake's shoreline at night in an effort to solve the riddle. With our flashlights in hand, we braved the night, the murmurs acting as an unseen hand to lead us. A palpable energy began to thicken the air, and the woodland appeared to be pulsating with its own life. The muttering grew louder as we got to where I had seen the figure in the lake. We sensed a charge in the air, and we felt pulled toward the lake by an invisible force. The surface of the lake was illuminated by our flashlights, and all that was visible were the moon's swaying reflections. When we were about to write the whispers off as nothing more than tricks of the mind, the lake exploded in a flurry of powerful ripples. The water appeared to tremble, as though a power concealed beneath the surface was struggling to emerge. Something dark and vague materialized, a hideous contortion of reality in its shape. As the figure emerged from the lake, we all let out a collective scream, its eyes appearing as empty spaces that sucked in the surrounding light. The murmurs combined to create an eerie song, a chorus of ghostly voices speaking a tongue that was foreign to us. The figure lingered over the water, a representation of the long-forgotten mysteries of the lake. Fear immobilizing us, we watched as the person made an ethereal motion to invite us. It was as if it pulled us into its universe, an ethereal place where the lines dividing the known and the unknown became more hazy. Now comprehensible, the whispers told of a lost story about a spirit doomed to travel in search of release and bound to the lake. Driven by an invisible force, we trailed the figure along the beach, the murmurs directing our every move. The shadows in the woodland enveloped us, creating eerie patterns. We were enmeshed with a power that was beyond our comprehension, caught up in a bizarre dance. The whispers became more urgent as we traveled more into the forest, begging for help. The figure guided us to an old tree with bizarrely twisted roots. Through the branches came a hollow, melancholy breeze that carried the weight of the spirit's anguish. The figure vanished into the moonlit clearing, leaving the old tree and us by ourselves. The murmurs built to a crescendo, telling the heartbreaking story of a soul that was imprisoned in two different realms and yearned to be freed from Silent Lake. Motivated by empathy, our goal was to release the soul from its ethereal confinement. The whispers led us through a ceremony, a complex dance of music and light that connected with the forest's primordial spirit. There was an invisible power in the air as the last chords reverberated across the clearing. The old tree was engulfed in blinding light, and the whispers vanished into the darkness. With the weight of centuries-old secrets lifted, the woodland became silent. We found ourselves by ourselves in the moonlit clearing, the once foreboding tree now serving as a sign of hope. However, as we turned to go, a voice of thanks and farewell resounded in our minds. Although the ghost of Silent Lake had been freed, its presence continued to linger in the shadows, a reminder of the thin veil separating the known world from the unknowable. The jungle had become quiet again, and the whispers had stopped. Once a sign of mystery, Silent Lake now reflected the peace we had come for in the middle of the forest. The sounds of the evening stayed in our thoughts as we returned to the campsite, serving as a reminder that sometimes the most profound secrets lie beyond the surface of the commonplace.